Hey, welcome. I
Thank
thought we start with
you.
some music.
Sounds good.
Since you've had a long day, it's always nice to start with music.
Yes.
So, welcome to Stillness and Chaos. I've got Shaheen Mistri, a dear friend and guide. I've got Po. With educators, we should always have soft toys, and also it's a good reminder that Shaheen and I shouldn't take ourselves too seriously. We've got lots to talk about, but it's probably important. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Daniel. I'm the founder and CEO of Because You. I and we truly believe that all of us are wise, compassionate, uh, joyful human beings. And sometimes a mental health diagnosis, emotional distress, grief kind of clouds who we are as human beings. So it's my life's purpose to kind of get us to tap into who we are as human beings and live life as we should. So stillness and chaos is kind of my attempt at doing that and doing it regularly. So I've got awesome guests like Shaheen every 2 weeks. We have a central theme. Today's is purpose as a well-being anchor. Um, and it's kind of a reminder that mental health is it's an important topic, it's a complex topic, it's an intersectional topic. All of us should be thinking about it, and sometimes it's kind of gray and boring and difficult, and it's good to sometimes have a little bit of lightness and joy, because that's the way it's kind of becomes easier. Okay, so welcome to those who will watch this on YouTube later. Hopefully, there'll be some people. Shaheen and I have no idea if anyone's watching this. The only way we'll know that you're alive is if you share comments or put in some questions. So please do that, anyone who's watching. So if I could share, I mean, Shaheen, this is a personal episode for me, because in many ways, the teaching experience, being there in a classroom with 61 kids in a slum school, really had a huge impact on me. Right? It transformed the way I think it unlocked my own leadership potential. It it made me realize that my purpose is actually bigger than me, and that's a really important anchor. And most importantly, that's where I met my wife. So I think it's a good outcome for everyone. So it's a really special episode. Thank you for taking the time. Welcome to Stillness and Chaos.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you. I
So
wish I
if
was
I
sitting there next to Poe and the guitar in your room. Your room looks a lot more interesting than mine right now.
yeah. So if I could do a quick introduction. So you are a dreamer. You started Akanksha schools with after school centers for kids in low income backgrounds in 1991, if I'm not wrong. It's And then in 2008 decided you should start Teach for India, which has at the moment got about 10,000 leaders, alumni, people like me who've gone into classrooms, taught, um, and looked at kids, looked at kind of academic, kind of getting kids up on that, but most importantly, looking at values and looking at them as human beings. 150 organizations, some of the alumni have started, reaching directly, indirectly 100,000 kids at the moment. Your next goal is 50 million kids, if I'm not wrong. So you are a dreamer, clearly, and you aim big. Second is your capacity to love. You have a massive capacity to love, whether it's the kids you've worked with, the teachers, your team, a personal I love that you take time out for me when I need it, and it's really special. So you have huge capacity for love. And lastly, I feel you're an artist. You're truly an artist because you're committed to your craft. You keep pushing yourself, keep pushing others, and you have a single-minded focus on what you want to do. So you're a dreamer. You have a huge capacity for love, and you're an artist. So I'd love to play a song for you. And
You?
since you're an artist, this is by Leonard Cohen, who the reason I'm playing this song is because he took 10 years to write this song, refine it, make it beautiful. I think there are 183 verses of it, and it's a reminder that you kind of you've been doing this work for a long time, and you've had a single-minded focus. So as you listen to this, kind of feel what you feel, and at the end of that, if you could just share, you're a complex, layered human being. Love to share, who or what has shaped you. Okay. First time I'm playing the guitar for you, no?
Wow, yes. First time.
There was a secret chord that David played, and it pleased the Lord. You don't really care for music, do you? Goes like this: the fourth, the fifth, the minor fall, the major lift, the baffled king composing hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. One more verse. Faith was strong, so you needed proof. God bathing on the roof. Beauty and the moonlight overthrew you. Tied you to her kitchen chair. She broke your throne and she cut your hair. And from your lips she drew a hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah.
Oh, thank you. I love that song very much. I love Cohen. Oh, beautiful. Thank you. I did not expect that.
Who or what has shaped you?
Gosh, I totally wasn't thinking about the question, listening to the song.
I mean, there are lots of things, but perhaps one or two that really come to you.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. This is not even an answer to the question, but what's coming up for me first right now is something. I was just meeting with a group of fellows outside, and we were sharing something that's been very present for us in the new year in terms of who we want to be as people. And I was sharing that on New Year's Eve, I was in Bali, and as it approached midnight, there were lots of fireworks, and I was actually in my room, and looking up at the sky with sort of a childlike wonder and all the color in the sky, and listening to the sounds. And then suddenly it struck me that these bombs that I was listening to and celebrating with, somewhere on the other side of the world, there were bombs that were terrifying young children. And both of those were true. Like the same thing, the same word, the same sound could both be celebration and terror at the same time. And that made me think a lot about walls. And I was thinking of how safe I was within these four walls of this bedroom, able to celebrate. And so that came up again as you asked the question, because I think I've been very, very lucky to have had walls around me, literally and metaphorically, that have kept me safe enough and full enough to be able to do what I've tried to do. And at the same time, I think my life has been an endeavor to not stay within those walls, but to look beyond those walls as well. And so I've been thinking a lot about walls in the new year, the ability to feel blessed by the walls that we have that keep us safe, and then also feel like challenged to look beyond walls. And so that idea of like truth and hope, I think, has
Mm.
shaped me a lot. Like trying to see the truth, which, you described me very, very sweetly as a dreamer. I think one of the burns of being a dreamer is you don't like to see the truth. And so one thing that I think has shaped me has been pushing myself to see the truth, but always trying to have the hope be a little bit bigger than the truth. So that was the first thing that emerged. And if I were to
Mm.
add one more, um, I think it's children. Like children have shaped me in the same space. I have a recency bias, Danny. So like a lot of what I share may just be from the last 3 days. But so a colleague shared this beautiful story. She has two first, uh, you know, 6-year-old twins, and they have a little garden. And there are lots of caterpillars that have suddenly emerged in that garden. And
Mm.
so she's like sitting at home one day and she's multitasking on a call, cooking dinner, very busy, mind is in 100 places. And her little 6-year-old daughter comes and tells her, Mama, come, 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 there's a caterpillar. And she looks at her daughter and says, like, I've seen that, I've seen the thousands of the same caterpillar. And her daughter looks at her and says, but you haven't seen this one.
Yes, sir.
And I thought, like, how beautiful. Like, if we stop and listen to children, I feel like we have actually all the answers of how to live meaningfully when we're young children. And as we get older, it becomes harder and harder to hold on to some of those truths. And so I feel very blessed that I've been so surrounded in such an immediate way by the most incredible children who have taught me how to be courageous, how to be honest, how to be resilient, how to have fun, how to like not take life too seriously, how to sing. Yeah, I think children have very profoundly shaped me.
Mm. Beautiful. I love that walls inside and out and the truth and hope that you talked about, especially in today's world. And I think that's kind of one of the things that stayed with me at Teach for India, right? On one hand, you kind of come in saying, "Oh, I've got this education. I can come and make a big difference," and then you realize it's so complex, it's so interconnected that actually, you need to have a lot of humility with that. And on the other hand, you kind of know that the kids that you work with, the impact that you've had, is long lasting, right? So it's kind of that duality, that polarity that you can sit with, which even today I feel really holds me in good stead with what you're talking about, the chaos of the world, but kind of knowing that in my little safe space, in my wall, in my kind of like thing, I can make a difference. um, I don't know if that resonates.
Yeah, and also like, one of the things that I was sharing with fellows at our institute this year is like the fellowship, or fellowship is an analogy for anything we do in life, but the fellowship is a roller coaster, right? It goes up and down, and in times when for you it's an up, like it
Mm,
feels like you have an ability to give in those times, right? To
mm,
give up your hope and your energy and your spirit. And then in times when it feels like a down, it feels like you have an opportunity to receive. And how do we learn both of those things, like how to give and how to receive? And so I was thinking about that a lot, like as I read the news, and I've been so devastated and heartbroken by what's happening in Palestine. I think it is the single biggest awful thing I have seen in my lifetime. And yet, then I keep reminding myself, but I am not in that place right now. And
yeah.
so it affords me like both the blessing and the responsibility to be joyful in a world that actually doesn't need me to be pulled down right now, but needs possibly my joy and my positive energy. because there's so many people who are not in that place right now to be able to offer that to the world. And so that's another thing I think that I've been thinking a little bit about.
Mm. There's a teacher I follow, Iknath Ishwaran, who talks about true wisdom is when you can find peace within, irrespective of what's happening outside. And once you find that, your way of being is peace and
Yeah,
is love, and that by itself has a multiplier effect on the people you're with. Um, so I love that, and even the kid story that you said, right? I think the presence, and we are always kind of all over the place, and if we look at a child, that is true mindfulness, that is true
yeah,
stillness. It might keep going from one place to another, but at one moment that child is there. um, yeah, learning from
yeah.
kids. Okay, so let me, before we go to, let's show you how comments come in. Fiona says, Danny, that's one of my favorite songs. I sang it for my niece when she was a newborn. What a gift. Thank you. God bless you,
Yeah,
Fiona. Suresh Yadav says, nice to see Shaheen after a long time. So, see, we can do this funky doodle stuff where we can put comments
very
in.
nice.
So,
Very impressed.
ask some questions. You can say how good Shaheen and I are looking. That my t-shirt, that my shirt is too loud, whatever you want to say. Um, let's come back to purpose, because that's kind of a big theme today. So you've given your life to education, clearly. Um, we'll talk a little bit about, I think, balancing that um, high drive purpose with also kind of taking care of your own well-being. But if you could talk a little bit about literally what is your life's purpose and why do you do what you do.
These are such big questions. Um, my life's purpose. I get a lot of joy and energy and meaning um, from from potential, um, and seeing, being a little bit of a part of people's journey of realizing their own potential. I think people, every single person, every single child is so precious. And I genuinely believe that most of us go through our lives not fully tapping into that greatest potential, or light that we have. And so for me, if individuals stand up to their brightest light, our
Mm,
countries and our worlds light up, and education for me, the right kind of education, feels like a beautiful, beautiful way to enable potential.
mm,
um yeah, I think that's probably one dimension of my purpose. I think the other the other side of it, or the other way to see it, when we talk about the truth and the hope, that's probably the hope. The truth is, I've always, like, since I've been a really little girl, like I can remember back to being 12, and feeling like the world just isn't a fair place for
mm,
people, and then also realizing that there's so much power in opportunity, that if anything can reverse what is unfair in the world, it is opportunity.
mm,
um, and so I guess both of those ideas, like a belief in potential, the idea that education fuels potential, but also like this deep belief that inequality, injustice, um, we have to like do our part to make the world fairer for all people. um, I think those two feel very important to me.
and that's a big purpose, right? It's something that I know was sparked off in you because of your experiences, what happened when you came back to Bombay from the US. Um, was it always this way, or did it kind of just build, and you come at this point? And I'd love to also talk about that journey, because I know it's not an easy journey. So I'd love to maybe for you kind of reflect back on how you got to where you're saying what you're saying, but also perhaps what might have been a bit challenging. might have made you question it in a way.
Yeah. I mean, interestingly, Danny, like, I feel like very early on, I had a very strong, like, intuitive sense that
Mm,
I wanted to do something with children when I was a child myself. So, like from the age of 12, every summer I was volunteering in the different countries we lived in. I worked with children who were visually impaired, hearing impaired. I volunteered at an orphanage. So that felt like
mm,
felt very right to me very early on. I actually
mm,
don't ever remember sitting down and saying, what do I want to do with my life? Beyond one actual choice point, which was very early on. Maybe I was like 16, 17. And I was very, very passionate about animals,
mm.
especially stray animals. In fact, as a 10, 11-year old with a younger brother, both of us would like bring stray animals home and hide them. We had a little like house in our garden that we didn't let adults into, and we would look after hurt animals and then find homes for them. So animals was like a very, very big thing for me, still is. And
Yeah.
then children. That was
Mm,
the only choice point in my life. And eventually I was like, we probably like kids probably need this more than animals, which is what um, had me make the choice. But since then, I've never really looked back on that being what I want to do and my purpose. I think that was also because I realized very early on that I just love being around children. I just
mm,
love it. Like, I mean, yesterday I was teaching a class actually on the Gaza conflict. Um, and the class was so beautiful, and there was a
mm.
point in class where we put off all the lights, we sat in a circle, we lit a candle, we all sang a song that the children wrote together about kindness. We
Wow.
talked about the role of peace in the world. And I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about that moment. But I think um, whether it's like you'll remember this from the fellowship, right? The joy when kids see you, and the di 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 bhaya bhaya, like just that way of being greeted, the tight hugs, the moments where kids open up, where they're able to do things they didn't believe that they could do. I think I realized very early on that that gave me tremendous joy. So it felt important, it felt joyful, and so
Mm,
it just felt like what I needed to do was just keep taking one step at a time
mm,
um,
mm.
towards that.
And what I'm also asking because a lot of us find it difficult to find purpose, right? It's not many of us who at the age of 12 kind of say, oh, okay, this is kind of where I want to go.
Yeah,
But a couple of things that, and many people at the age of 50 also don't know what our purpose
yeah,
is. That's totally fine. uh, and but what I'm
yeah,
taking away is this thing about the intuition. It's there's this intuition that all of us have, and maybe perhaps listening to it a little bit more,
yeah,
might be helpful. And just what you said, this joy and happiness, and this feeling of, it's almost like your spirit is lighter when you kind of move towards your purpose.
yeah.
I feel that's a nice way to, almost, if it was almost like a someone who's saying, how do I find my purpose? Maybe these are a couple of things to say, here's a roadmap. No, not a roadmap,
Yeah.
but a couple of.
Also, yeah. Also, I feel like I never thought about like what my purpose was.
Yeah.
And I wonder if sometimes like the question itself feels so overwhelming that
Yeah.
I need to find my purpose. For me, it was like, okay, like I love kids. Let me spend my summer doing this.
Yeah.
And then, okay, like, I love it
Yeah.
a lot. Let me take the first step. And the first step led to the second step. And
Yeah.
so I think over time, I can today articulate it as my purpose. But I think it felt much easier at that because it didn't
Yeah.
feel very high stakes. It felt
Yeah.
like just take that first step. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Take the first step. Yeah. Love that. Take the first step and build up.
Yeah.
Something around, like, you talked a little bit about the shadow side of being a dreamer, and you have this vision, you have this high bar in a way, and this is something we've seen in the sector as well, in the not-for-profit sector, especially in India, is that the social impact, the work is very, very, it's I don't want to say draining, but it's a lot emotionally. It's a lot because the need is so much. So I'd love to maybe just connect that to purpose and how, you know, like how's that been an anchor, and if there are a couple of other anchors that you have for your own well-being.
Yeah, I feel so wise today answering this question, but the real the real truth is that it's been such a journey. Um, I don't think I understood well-being, wholeness at all as a younger person. I don't remember thinking about like eating lunch or what time I was sleeping or looking after myself. Um, and
Mhm.
I don't even think I valued until a certain point looking after the people around me. For me, it was all about there are kids who need help in the world, and like that's the only thing that matters. And so it was a very urgent, um, not very joyful way of
Mm.
working. Um, I think over time, I still feel like there is a slight danger in over prioritizing self. I'm not sure that I understand thinking a lot of like keeping yourself at the center of everything. I'm not sure I understand that as well-being, but I have come to believe that living a whole life is the most beautiful thing, and that what you do and your work is one dimension of that and not the whole thing. I think that's been a real journey for me, Danny, and
Yeah.
counterintuitively I actually feel I'm a lot more effective at work after having made that discovery. So, today I really do a lot of things in my life. Like I spend time with my kids and my dogs and my wider family, and I have friends, and I have an incredible partner, and I watch movies, and I paint, and I travel, and I, don't work most weekends, and it still all gets done. And I
Mm.
think the shift actually was not a shift of timetable. It wasn't, for me at least, about saying, I'm going to work 9 to 7 and then shut off. I think that works for a lot of people. For me, that wasn't it. It was an internal shift of saying, actually, like I am important and I'm also unimportant. My work
Mm.
is important and it's also really not that important. So it was making the work less high stakes. It was like laughing at myself when I did stupid things and made mistakes, and just enjoying the journey, like not worrying so much about the things that were hard to see in the future, but saying what I know to be true is this moment. Let me make this moment important and joyful and do my best in the little things. It was a big shift from an obsession with big solutions to a real belief in like small things mattering. So it was some of these internal shifts that I think gave me a
Mm.
feeling of stillness and peace and wholeness. Um,
And this theme of identity, right? Like I feel a lot of us, and I had this for a very long time, and I still do, is that work gives us is our in some ways rules our identity, and we have this strong thing about if I am not a lawyer, who am I, and what is my worth in a way, and like I totally relate, I totally resonate. I think a lot of people probably do, and I think that is the work of kind of that internal shift. Another one which I've been kind of working on, especially, I mean, the reason I started do this work is because I've been working on my own mental health, and very bad mental health, for a long time. And a lot of the time I would realize you kind of go 5 steps forward and you come 3 steps back. That is very intense and very like a lot. And I would always try and mend myself. And I say, I'm kind of broken. How do I kind of mend myself? And I feel now I've realized very recently that actually I am whole in my brokenness, and I can just show up, and I can be myself. And, things might get bad later, but that's still, that's going to be part of me. And I kind of learn from each whatever it is that's happening to me. And the journey has been crazy, right? You talked about in the beginning, it's not there. How was there a particular transition point for you? When did you realize this? Then usually something happens when this realization starts to dawn.
Yeah, I don't think there was a big moment actually. I think it's been one, I think it's for me it was definitely linked to mastery as well. I think the better you get
Mm,
at what you do, the more you're willing to take risks with your time. So for me, that was one part of it. The work just felt a little bit less overwhelming after a certain
mm,
point.
mm,
But I think the other was like, as I started to step outside of work, I realized that one, I enjoyed that. And two, I was able to bring that excitement and that perspective back to
mm,
work. I think my fear for a long time was the work is so important. It's so important that how can I do anything else? I won't be doing, there was a feeling of guilt around doing
mm,
anything else. And when I realized actually nothing is that important, and I am certainly not that important, a lot of what's driving that mindset for myself is my own ego. When I began to realize that, I began to understand that I can step outside. And actually, what I found as I did that was I was more joyful, I had more energy, and I was able to bring that back to the thing I cared deeply about, which was my purpose and my work as well.
mm,
And also, like, please, like, know that this is totally imperfect and it's still, but I think what has become much easier is when I feel imbalanced, I'm able to feel it faster now, and I'm
mm,
able to correct it. I don't think I've found my perfect equilibrium by any means, but I think I've become significantly more aware of it, than I was earlier.
mm. Um, So I've realized that for some reason comments are not coming in through YouTube because there's something that's wrong. But one of my students says, Ganesh, he said, Bhaiya, I'm sending this message to you on your personal number. Blah, blah, blah. Please, can you convey? Thank you, Shaheen ma'am, for founding Teach for India and granting us the privilege of being taught by great mentors who genuinely care about students and not treating us as just another student. Um, let's see. Vandana says total sync with your thoughts. The steps have gone leaps and bounds. At some point, there was some sync, but right now, I don't know what it was, Vandana. I'm sorry. Um, Vivek, you have a point. Probably they're under resourced. Again, I'm not able to see some of these comments. I'm so sorry, people who are
No
watching.
problem.
But please try and keep sending comments. Shaheen and I will keep talking about stuff. Um, where was I going? So one of the things that what you talked about, the guilt and the realizing that I am not sort of going about the ego. I think there's a danger sometimes, especially now, where there's a lot of put yourself at the center. Let's not once that happens, everything starts to fall into place. And there's this over thing about self compassion and taking care of yourself, and there's a fine line which I think is really important. And one of my guests, Aparna Piramal, she's amazing active advocate for mental health. She talks about how having rigor and empathy and balancing both those two are so important, right? It's kind of yeah. So that kind of came to mind when you talked about it. That you got to have the rigor of working on yourself and keep pushing yourself in some way, but also having empathy with yourself and kind of layering that ego piece that you talked about. um, yeah. What else? Anchors. So you talk a little bit about family, you talk a little bit about the ego, you talk a little bit about the internal shifts. Um, any other anchors that you can think of? And I mean, is this something that you have in like consciously do, or because I remember one conversation where you talked about the work with the Gandhi ashram and with that piece of work. I'd love for you to share that as well.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned at the beginning the value of love. And I was contemplating, like, when you asked the question, what is your purpose? Um, the value of love has become like very, very central for me as an anchor. And I think
Mm.
I've been lucky to have people who I love and who love me. And I think that probably has been my most stable anchor. Um, and I think I learned a lot about love from the Gandhi ashram, and specifically the ecosystem that has developed around there. So there's a community in Ahmedabad of people who really are just trying to live by values of love and compassion. Um, it's just, they just believe in doing really small things in the moment, not planned, no outcome, no measurement, but just little acts of good. And when I first experienced this, maybe some 20 years ago, I found it very disorienting. So these were people, I was very outcomes driven, I still am. And these were folks who didn't care about outcomes. They just talked about the journey. And I was very focused on what's the big solution that's going to solve education in the world. And they kept talking about these tiny things and small steps. And to give you an example, we were sitting in a car on a very, very hot day in Ahmedabad, and the car stopped at a traffic light, and we were in an air conditioned car, and they called children to just put their head in front of the air conditioner in the car for those 2 minutes. And I just thought it was so crazy. I was like, but like, they're going to be hot the whole day. What difference are these minutes going to make? And their response was like, the moment is the whole, right? So for that moment, they had a moment of air, of joy, of. So I found these things very, very disorienting, but somehow I kept going back and make about 2, 3, sometimes 4 trips a year back to Ahmedabad to immerse in this way of thinking. And I think it's shifted me very profoundly. Like today, I believe there's much more hope in a world where millions of us do tiny things for the people around us, than a few of us search for large solutions. Um, the other very like interesting counterintuitive uh, shift in me after being in this ecosystem was one of leadership. So I think I had a much more traditional idea of leadership, strong presence, front of the room kind of leadership, very similar to Gandhi's type of leadership. And this ecosystem really believes in this sort of many to many leadership. They say, no, but look at nature. In nature, nobody's leading. It's this incredible ecosystem where everything is connected. And so I think experiencing these small acts of people just doing things because they believe it's the right thing to do, no other reason. I took my my brother, who's a fashion photographer from New York, to I was like, you just have to come with me. He's like, but what's the agenda? I said, there's never an agenda. You just have to come. And my brother is a smoker. And
Yeah.
when we got to Ahmedabad, Jayesh Bhai, who's one of the mentors of the ecosystem, he said, let's just walk. So my brother looked at me and said, what do you mean, let's just walk? But we just started walking. And Jayesh Bhai met a young man on the road who he didn't know, who was smoking a cigarette. And he started a conversation with him. And 2 minutes later, he asked him for his cigarette, smiling away, stamped out his cigarette. He did this 3 times within 2 hours. The third time, he actually took the whole packet of cigarettes scrunched it up and threw it away. Meanwhile, my brother from New York is just looking at him thinking he's crazy, like someone is going to slap him, someone is going to. And finally my brother asked Jayesh Bhai, like, why are you doing this? And it's someone's lifestyle choice and their privacy. And Jayesh Bhai just looked at him and said, I think of him as my brother. If he was your real brother, wouldn't you tell him that this was bad for you? And so, and it's the most visible manifestation I've ever experienced of what fraternity can actually look like. Like overcoming your understanding of stranger and, family member, and to just say we're all connected. And can I do my little part for the person next to me in that moment? So yeah, I mean, so many stories, but those are a few that emerge.
Yeah, that Ubuntu principle just comes to mind when you talked about that. And
Yeah,
value of love as an anchor. I'm taking that away. It's huge.
yeah,
How do we bring hope? The small things. It's the journey, not the just destination. It's the small steps that bring out the kindness, the love, the joy. And the leadership is that we are one and we're all interconnected. Very very wise you're sounding today.
I told you, I'm getting old, Danny.
Imagine how you'll be in 5 years. Okay, there are some questions. People who are here who know me, please send comments on the side or what you're seeing, like screenshots of comments I can't see. So there's one comment question here which says, "How did you shield yourself from the stress and anxiety that may have been felt due to expectations of parents, peers, friends, cousins? What advice do you have for kids who are conditioned to follow a traditional career journey?"
Such a beautiful question.
Hmm.
I mean, honestly, I think a little bit of the answer comes back to my personality. I'm a little bit of a rebel, and I always have been, and I've never really cared too much about what people think. I've
Hmm.
cared disproportionately about a few people and what they think, but not so much about what others think. I think I came to realize over time that whatever you do and whoever you are, some people are going to agree, some people are going to disagree, some people are going to like you, and some people are not. And so you may as well be really authentically yourself
Hmm.
and then know who likes you, who doesn't, who has opinions, who doesn't. And so I think not caring too much about people's opinions has helped me a lot in that way. And the other thing, I was just sharing this with somebody yesterday, in fact, a young person, very similar, like, pressure about what to do and a life choice. And I said, one thing I told myself several years ago is like the small things let go of, like if,
Hmm.
if they're going to make people happy, but the really few big things. And to me, they were the person who you want to be with, the work and purpose that you want to live for. Like these things, remember, you have one life, and these things are too important to let anybody else shape. And I feel if you have that courage in the moment, not always, but often, what happens is the people that love you, even if they disagree with that choice,
Hmm.
they come to see that that choice has made you happy, successful, and ultimately that's what they want for you. Um, and so just take the risk, with those things at least. And I feel very grateful that on those two things, like, the person I want to live with and who I love, um, and the work that I want to do, on those things, I've sort of, yeah, done what I believe is right for me.
Hmm. And if I could add another layer, is you've now, in hindsight, kind of added all these different dimensions, which also has, in a way, separated your identity and your ego from the work. And I'm sure that helps, right? It's a practices, it's whatever.
Yeah.
I have a couple of reflections on that, right? You talked about being authentic and kind of getting support. sometimes it's difficult to be authentic, right? Because it's like sometimes you don't know how, like, who are you and what is authenticity? Is this really me or is this a phase?
Yeah.
And I think there's a huge amount of work, which I have realized now, which needs to be done, on what is your authentic self. Is this a phase? Is this something I just want to do? What are my values? What is it that I care about? Who is it that I care about? And I love the rebel idea. And it's very easy to kind of get disheartened, right? And especially if you're trying to do something as ambitious as you, or all of us as entrepreneurs, kind of we're always being told, it's difficult, there's too much stress. And I think something that's helped me is having people around me who know me, love me, who support me, and are also able to tell me the truth in some ways, right? And who can balance that, because otherwise it's quite difficult. And the last thing I'll say, balancing the stress, especially at home, and this again is something I can personally relate to, is having an open, honest line of communication, and kind of almost at some point trusting the other to know more than you. Sometimes, I think some of us have to make that choice, I feel. Um, and yeah, so it's very complicated, this question, a very
It
complex, and it's a
is.
beautiful, right? Because
Yeah.
it's
I mean,
probably
can I share
own
one?
so many different.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah. No, I was gonna just share one other reflection that's really helped me, because I think sometimes self work itself becomes overwhelming and stressful. And so, like, for me, it's also been about like reminding myself that I'm more than my thoughts, and not getting too lost in my own thoughts and my own journey to become my authentic self. That itself feels like a stressful endeavor. And so, one thing that has been very helpful to me is just
Mm,
these two words, just be gentle. I think,
mm,
like, when I started being less harsh with myself and more gentle, just everything changed. And I think the way that I treated other people around me changed as well.
mm,
Um, it just felt like a much easier way to live life. So, yes, I may have an aspiration to be authentic, but I also don't need to be fully authentic all the time. That's difficult. That's also okay. I can also make mistakes in that journey. That's also so, just that gentleness to myself, like what you shared a little bit earlier, that realization that like you're enough, you're whole today,
mm,
and using the joy and energy that comes from that state to
mm,
actually become a little bit more the person you want to be. That has also been very helpful to me.
mm. Yeah, I mean, what I'm taking, I mean, taking away lots, but feels like this journey, this inner journey is endless, and we can go on talking about it and reflecting about it. Lovely. Okay, one more question. How do you sustain, good one. How do you sustain the kind of passion and energy for over 2 decades and counting?
Well, 3 decades. I told you I'm getting old. This is like year 35 now. Um, I mean, for me, it's been a lot about staying very, very close to why I started this work. Like, I did not start this work to build an organization. I did not start it to be a CEO. I started it because I love children and because
Mm,
I believed I wanted to be of service to children. And except for the year of the pandemic, I have always been directly connected on the ground. I've had one group of children that I've worked with. And I think that has really given me energy and reminded me in a very immediate way of why I do what I do. So, like, why I do what I do, of course, there's a big vision and there's 50,000 leaders and there's all of that good stuff. But really, it's because yesterday when I met Aman, like I just felt happy. And when I saw Anam in her school yesterday, I just couldn't believe how far she's come and how much she's challenged herself. And so for
mm,
me, it's really that gives me the energy. I think the other has been what you said, like what an incredible community. I think, the best part of the work that we do is the people that get attracted to the work. Like, I feel so inspired, like the number of stories that I have from the last 2 days, of people that I met who are, and it's not like, and this is very, I think, pertinent for this conversation. Actually, what makes me proud of people in our community is not what they are doing. Like, what they are doing is lovely and it's great, but who they are is what makes me so proud. And I think to be part of a community of people who are struggling to be slightly better versions of themselves day after day after day. And I think we see that about each other,
Yeah.
right? Like, we see each other today and 5 years ago and 10 years ago, and we see that we're evolving and changing. And it's so beautiful to see that. I think that gives me a lot of joy. So to be able to do this work with children, but with this incredible community that's constantly inspiring me and reaffirming that the work matters, I think that's what keeps me here. Yeah.
I'm hugely thankful for being in this community. I feel it gives me a lot of joy and hope and love, and I've got my best friends, some of my best friends in this community. My wife, the supporter, my biggest thing. Can't get better than that. Where was I going with this? That is also a good plug, by the way. If you're looking for an incredible, purposeful work life, there are a lot of cool opportunities at Teach for India. Reach out, go to the website, check it out. Please apply. I highly recommend it.
Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
not to plug Teach for India, which thank you for plugging, but the work of working directly with children, I think, is transformational for our inner journey. That's something I've realized. There is something about a child's innocence and purity and their profoundness and being around them that like shifts you so fundamentally. um, yeah. I tell people I've had so many opportunities to travel around the world and go to big conferences and have so many opportunities to learn. And all of that together has not amounted to a fraction of what I've learned from children, and especially children who live in poverty. What they've been able to teach me has been phenomenal.
hmm. And I mean, as a young parent, I can see how that's influenced the way I bring up my child. Right? And
Yeah.
it's a multiplier effect. Okay, one or two more questions, then we're gonna close because I know you're busy. Um, ah, how nice. Looking back, are there any regrets? Would there be anything you would do differently?
Mm, I
And
mean,
if I just
yeah,
add, because
yeah,
yeah, I mean, there's something around sort of connected to the challenges, right? Because we've talked a lot about the hope and the vision and the inspiration, and I think this is kind of going a little kind of into the weeds.
yeah,
Any
yeah.
regrets, whatever challenges taught you?
Nothing significant, and that's not to say that there aren't many things that haven't gone well or many things that I could have done better. But I think over time I genuinely started to see the things that came my way as needing to come my way for the reason that they came. And that reframing of how I saw the challenges in my life.
Hmm.
um, I had a very difficult marriage, for example, but like I have the most beautiful daughter. So I don't know, like I feel like everything that's happened has happened for a reason and been such a gift in terms of what it's added to my life. And I feel the same way about my work. Smaller things, many. Like I often feel like I could have had a much bigger vision when I started. I could have believed a lot more. I think children taught me to keep raising the bar. Sometimes I feel like I should have switched the order of the two organizations I started. If I had started a leadership pipeline 35 years ago, we may have had many more organizations in the ecosystem. So like there are smaller things like that, but I think the most fundamental has really been that to not like, I mean, not that I like it when a challenge happens. I still feel very frustrated uh, when I'm going through the challenge, but
Yeah.
I'm able to hold that with this idea that this challenge has come for a reason, and it is an opportunity for me to learn and grow in my own leadership and in the human journey that I have ahead of me, and that has really helped.
Hmm. Three things for me. Like for me, this trusting the universe is very big. I think what we talked about, because in this world,
Yeah,
I feel trusting the universe is actually a faith which has held me in good stead. That feeling, the like sometimes we run and deflect and run away from the challenge, but in that moment, feeling it, doing the work, it's very difficult. But I think in that moment, it's kind of kind of feeling the emotions and figuring out how to deal with that and sitting with that is. I realize now after doing this work in the mental health space, really healthy. And there are lots of different techniques. And the last is what you talked about, learning from your challenges. And I think this is important because when you're in that crisis mode, it's probably very difficult to learn, right, from what you're saying. But after, when you get distance from it, that's a beautiful opportunity to actually learn and see, okay, there's a reason what's happening, and there's something that's happening, and there's a message that's coming to me. Um, Thank you. Last couple. Does trusting yourself make one self-centered?
it's a beautiful question. Yeah, I think there's a beautiful balance between self and other, um, and knowing where you stand on that spectrum. Um, can you trust yourself, but also trust others? Listen deeply to others. I think sometimes listening deeply to others makes you realize that your perspective was not right. That helps
Mm,
you become slightly less self-centered. So I do think there's a really big risk in over focusing on the self in any way, whether it's trusting yourself, whether it's believing your opinion is right. Like, I feel on the spectrum of self and other, I have
mm,
found it healthier to be closer to other than to
mm,
self. And I think actually thinking about others and their needs and learning over time slowly to become a better listener and to be
mm.
more of service to people has helped me discover more about myself than if I had explicitly set out to discover about myself. So I think self and other are very closely related.
Yeah,
And without like thinking about both, I think it's actually hard to find well-being.
love that. And if I can add one more layer, so Yogananda Paramahamsa, a beautiful mystic teacher, talks about how the language of the soul is intuition. So intuition is the language of the soul, and sometimes listening to that, trusting that, super difficult. And
Yeah.
I guess it's like a muscle, right? The more you do that, the more you kind of listen to it, and it's that balance between self and other. Um, Lovely. Great to see you folks together in a much. Thank you, Ashish. Thank you for being here. Vandana says, always wise. Shaheen, you're always wise. It's not just because you become
I
old.
am really not always wise, but thank you.
Uh, okay, last couple. Actually, let's just close on the hour. This is a good time for people who are here to share as a way to share appreciations for the wisdom and the openness and the vulnerability of Shaheen. This is a good time if you want to say anything, because we're going to close in 2 minutes. Anything comes to mind?
Sorry, are you asking me this question?
Yeah, sorry, this is your question. What's your
Yeah.
ambition?
Yeah. I mean, Danny, what's emerging for me is not an ambition for myself, but an ambition for the world. And
Hmm.
I think I tie myself to that. I really want peace in the world. I want what is common in our humanity to be larger than our differences, even though our differences really matter, like our identities matter, but can our most important identity be our identity as human beings? Because in my years on this earth, I've come to see that there are some things that just matter to all of us: peace and love and belonging. And these are human values. And I deeply want them for the world. And so, my ambition for myself right now is to think about how education can be a vehicle for a more peaceful world, for a more just world. Um, and I think education has the power to be able to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a nice way to loop back from where you started with your New Year's story. Last question. I ask this to every guest. What does stillness and chaos mean to you? When you think about it, image, phrase, what does it mean to you?
I mean, the first thing that came to mind right now, Danny, was when you're just before you go to sleep, or do you feel calm? Do you just feel calm inside yourself that it's been a good day, whatever's happened, it's been a good day. You feel calm inside yourself. You're able to put your head down, excited about waking up to a new day. I think that's the image that comes to mind right now.
Beautiful. So hopefully all of us who are watching this will think about that before we go to sleep. But thank you, Shaheen, for your wisdom, your love, your capacity to think big and think about the interconnectedness life and use education and the wisdom from kids and the joy that we get and your purpose to just be yourself and kind of show up every single day. Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you. Thank
Thank you
you.
for watching, everyone. See you next time.